All right, awesome. So, what's up, Facebook? What's up, YouTube? This is Kevin from Canine Freedom Dog Talk. It's been a minute, but I'm excited to start doing some more live streams again, and I'm really excited to have Tyler Muto back on live stream. Especially, he's my first one I'm doing, and I'm excited to just talk about resource guarding. But like for those who don't know you, Tyler, why don't you let everyone know like where you're at, like what you do, and yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive right into the resource guarding stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I live in Buffalo, New York, and these days I primarily work with other professional dog trainers, helping to coach them to just improve their best practices in virtually every aspect of their dog training businesses, whether that's the actual training itself, which usually people are looking for, um, to get more confident when it comes to things like aggression and reactivity and those types of topics. But sometimes it's also, getting better at working with their clients, getting better client follow through, but also business related things. So obviously, if we're in business for ourselves, we have to make money at the end of the day. And a lot of people, especially these days, do need a lot of help with their businesses. These are not the easiest of economic times, especially to be getting started in. So I do a lot of like actual business end coaching these days. I used to run a full scale training center here in Buffalo, nearly 10,000 square feet. We had about a dozen employees at any given point in time. And my main job there was coaching my team as well. So I've been through it all myself. And then I also run Consider the Dog, which is a membership based website. We produce and distribute online courses on dog behavior.
Hmm. Yeah, and I can say that Tyler's coaching has been really helpful. Like I've been doing a couple like online coaching with Tyler, and it's been super helpful when it comes to the business part of it and just being able to kind of talk to someone who's done it all. It's been awesome, like just having such a great wealth of knowledge just talk to, and it's been really helpful just having that one-on-one time. And I'm also subscribed to the Consider the Dog course, so I also can attest to that. And if anything, like if you guys who want more insight on like how to work with resource guarding can also go on that website and purchase the module. And I'll leave the link on at the end of the talk. So then if anyone is interested, I'll leave it on there for people. But
Yep.
but yeah, if anything, if any listeners or anybody's like watching right now, feel free to just comment hi, or if you know someone that has like a question, feel free to just drop a question in, and in between Tyler and I would love to just answer any questions relating to the topic. And yeah, otherwise say hi, but otherwise we'll just get started with this awesome topic. So um yeah, Tyler, like I remember when I asked you like to do a live stream of research guarding, I know you said, and I call you're like I love talking about research guarding, so I was like awesome. I even real I was really happy to hear that. So um I guess one of the things is like, research guarding can be a really interesting topic just because like in your opinion, like because I know between like there's different routes on how a dog could have developed resource guarding, but for your um with your experience and things like that, like do you feel like it's genetics? Do you feel like it's stemming from like certain like insecurities, or like how do you feel like when it comes to dogs, like how do they kind of
Yeah, it's a good
develop that?
question. I mean, I think at the end of the day, from my position and the work that I do, the best I can often do is speculate, right? So I wasn't
Hmm.
there. I wasn't there when it all started. So the best I can do is speculate on it. I think with any type of aggression, there's always, but not always, um, there's often a genetic component at the very least. That doesn't mean that the dog is just genetically aggressive, but it might be, slightly more or less predisposed to resort to aggression given a certain set of circumstances, right? So
Hmm.
two completely different dogs genetically can be raised in identical environments with identical experiences, and they're just going to deal with those experiences differently. Um, so for sure, there's definitely a genetic component. I think anytime we're looking at aggression, which is really just to say there's a component of the dog's personality, right? Something that's just sort of there. From there, obviously you hear a lot of stories about, okay, dogs that were raised in really uncontrolled environments, or maybe they had to compete a lot for their food with their litter mates, or dogs that were in like hoarding type situations. I mean, all of those things are certainly plausible. And then sort of like, I probably wouldn't put this into like a column of like causation necessarily, but in my experience, there is often a correlation at the very least, um, a pretty strong correlation with dogs that demonstrate resource guarding, that also the household doesn't have the most clearly defined like hierarchy, the most clearly defined authority structure. I mean, however you want to word that, right? Like leadership and dominance and all that kind of stuff. It's all like, these are all like taboo sort of topics and words, but it does matter. Like the who you are to the dog matters. And I think it plays a strong role in whether a dog is more or less likely to display resource guarding towards you specifically as the dog's owner. I think the relationship there really matters quite a bit. And I do think that there's a strong, like I said, a strong like correlation with like lack of clearly defined leadership roles. Sometimes it's just people like sometimes people accidentally create resource guarding too, right? Like it's not uncommon that I would get people that come and they have a resource guarding dog and they say, hey, I've tried ever since he was a puppy to like stick my hand in his food bowl every time he eats to get him used to that. And it's like, well, that's probably why he's biting you, because it's really obnoxious and it's going to
Mhm.
aggravate anybody. That would aggravate me. So like, I can't really blame your dog for being irritated with you for doing that. And that's not necessarily a leadership thing. I mean, certainly like I don't know, like a good leader wouldn't do that, right? Like imagine your boss at work coming over and just like messing with you every time you're trying to eat your lunch, right? Like that's not a good leader.
Yeah,
But it's really kind of, there's like a trust breakdown. There's like just a complete, like just a lack of understanding there. And those things can all contribute as well. So, I mean, by and large, I think it's not too different from any other type of aggression. I will say, like, I think with something like leash reactivity, and things like that, there's a stronger correlation with insecurity versus resource guarding. Resource guarding dogs tend to be a little bit more confident dogs in my experience, but not
mhm,
always. Whereas like leash reactive dogs tend to, they're feeling kind of uncertain a lot of times in those moments.
for sure. Yeah, and I mean, it's just like you get so many like bad advice when it comes to the research garden. Like I don't know if like I remember one time when someone there was I forgot what trainer I heard this from, but it was just like this thing where like you spit in the dog's food or something to claim it, or and I'm just like, what? I was like
Yeah.
that. I
Oh
was
yeah,
like,
I've seen
and
that kind of stuff too, like spitting in the food,
yeah,
putting the food in your mouth and then spitting it out. And there's all
yeah,
kinds of wacky stuff, man, that comes down the pipeline of the ages of dog training. And you know better and you do better. What can I say?
yeah, no, for sure. And that's the thing. It was like there wasn't like good content that helped go through it or like effectively help deal with resource guarding. It was just like, people were just like, oh, just leave multiple food bowls out or things like that. And I'm just like, and Google, so there's so many people just type how to deal with it in Google. There's so much training advice on there, but then they're just like so like flooded and things like that. That is just like, I'm just like, I'm glad just, have like trainers like you and like other people put out like way better content so that's like much smoother for people instead of like everyone just going through like 20 20 things to like spit food, put 10 bowls out or like put their hand in there when they feed. It's just because it's like everyone's just like at their wits end at that point.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah, because it's like especially with resource guarding, it's like because obviously it's like most commonly like we deal with like dogs who are resource guarding like high value stuff like bones or even toys and even just like their food and even just like right like because you would consider like even just having the like resource guarding like if they try to guard over like spaces or like bed or like even like owner would
Yeah,
be good.
I consider, so yeah, I mean, definitely space can be resource guarding. I sort of put it in a different category a lot of times. I don't necessarily have a different label for it, but the like the treatment plan, I guess you'd call it, is like slightly different. Not terribly so, but slightly different in those instances. Um, and then I also would say like the treatment plan is quite different if we're talking about a dog who resource guards from humans versus like a multi-dog household where the dogs are resource guarding from each other.
Mhm.
The latter there, I think, is a trickier one for most people. Like it's very doable for an experienced professional in the right sort of setting. It can be tricky for dog owners. So, like if you don't have the ability as a professional to do a board and train and work the dogs through it, um, sometimes it is best to look at more of a management plan because some of the treatment, the training plans, at least that I've seen be truly effective, there's a considerable amount of risk involved. And so if you don't know what you're doing, you don't have full control over the situation, things can get pretty shaky pretty quickly. Whereas resource guarding from humans, resource guarding particularly from the dog's own owner, things like food and bones, is actually relatively straightforward. I think it's one of the more straightforward forms of aggression to deal with. I think a lot of trainers would agree with that. It's one of the ones that lends itself a little bit more to like a step by step, kind of paint by numbers, if you will, type of approach versus like really serious human aggression or other like very complicated things. So we deal with a lot of that kind of stuff. They're just the resource guarding from humans, food, bones. And then particularly a lot of dogs will only resource guard things that they're not supposed to have. So things
Mhm.
that they've stolen, like from the garbage can or an item of clothing or a child's toy that they know they're not supposed to have. There are a lot of dogs that will not resource guard their own food and bones, but if it's something that they know the owner is going to try to take away, those are the things that they're going to get guardy over.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I can definitely agree, and I definitely agree with the relationship part where, like, there's, like, that lack of clarity or that lack of leadership that's, like, the dog just try definitely get especially where I feel like maybe the dog just has, like won't do it with necessarily maybe the husband, but might do it with towards, like, the other partner,
Yeah.
or, like, the maybe
Or
not the
what happens
yeah.
really commonly, at least used to happen very commonly at my training center, was the dog would come in for a board and train, and we like the dog will not resource guard from us.
Mhm.
That's very common. That doesn't limit our ability to work with the dog or train the dog and prepare it to go home. Like that's kind of part of our process. Is like we know sort of like how to deal with those situations, but the dog often will not show that guarding behavior towards us, even though it shows it towards its owner, because our relationship to the dog is just very different. We're in a position of control. We're in a very leveraged position, kind of straight out of the gate, because the dog's sort of in our domain,
Mhm.
and we control, virtually all aspects of the dog's experience while it's there. Um, and we're experienced handlers, and we're not there to just like cuddle. And I always tell people, it's always easier, it's like your dog, when it comes to me for board and train, like your dog's never seen me cry. You know what I mean? Like your dog's never seen me in a moment of weakness.
Mhm.
And so even a professional will often have an easier time working with somebody else's dog versus their own personal dog. And it's just part of the benefit of having a professional help you with these things or be able to get the dog over the hump of things, because we're just in a better position to do that and facilitate the change more quickly before handing things over to you.
Mhm. Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I mean, coming from me and, like, everybody would like, who has their own dog, it's always like it's al it's always like it's easier to work with, like, a different dog versus your personal dog, and it's just, like because you have that relationship, so,
Yeah, there's
um,
emotion tied up into it.
yeah.
Yep.
Um, so I guess, like, if like, say, like, we had a client that, like, came up to you or us, like, having a dog with, like, resource guarding issues, like, I guess, like, one question could be, like, because we talked about, like, need to understand, like, the clarity and, like, understanding the leadership part.
Mhm.
What kind of, like, prerequisites would you like if you were talking to a client right now, or like a tip or a trainer, like, regarding, like, research going, like, what are some things you want to have in place, or kind of like prerequisites before we start, like, getting in before we start implementing it with a dog per se.
I mean, before we start implementing what
Like
specifically?
just
So
like a
like,
training a training plan, or like just like what
yeah,
would.
I mean, I don't necessarily need any prerequisites to, I mean, I'm going to start my training plan. The dog could be totally green, right? There's not really anything.
Mhm,
I don't use muzzles much with resource guarding personally, because there's just plenty of other ways to keep things safe.
mhm.
Not that I don't use muzzles in general. I'm a huge fan of muzzles. I just don't
Yeah,
find them to be needed often with resource guarding, and
yeah,
they can sometimes get in the way.
okay,
So there's not really a lot of prerequisite. Everything that's might be considered a prerequisite, I guess, is sort of built into the training plan itself, right?
mhm.
So it's not like when I say I can get into it right away, that doesn't mean that right away I'm like, if the dog resource guards its food, for instance, I'm not, on day one giving the dog a bowl full of food and then coming up and doing some magical resource guarding protocol, right?
Yeah,
But the process itself, the training plan itself, is built from the ground up. So it's sort of
okay,
assuming that we have to teach those kinds of things.
yeah. Because I think, yeah, because like so, so like talking about like how we address or how we like try to train with the resource growing. Like I know with your course, like we are like it talked about like teaching like a like a drop it. Like I saw
Mhm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
like
And so that's part of the training plan. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So like essentially what I'm always doing is I'm working, I'm like reverse engineering.
Hmm.
So what I'm going to think about is like, what do I need? Like, what do I need like the end stage of this process to look like? And
Hmm.
so if we take, the real common case of a dog who resource guards its own food or maybe a bone, because they're kind of the same. I'll usually start with food because it's easier to control, even if the dog is a bone guarder.
Hmm.
Um, and so what I'd say is like, okay, so what I want at the end of this is a couple things. So one is this dog has a a false narrative, right? This dog has this false belief that there's some sort of conflict between them and I when it comes to this resource, that like I want the resource, I'm going to try to steal it. Like it's a complete false belief. So one thing that I want to make sure happens is I want to make sure the dog kind of comes to realize that this conflict that they've created just doesn't exist. There is no conflict here. And that's really important to put at the outset, because there are a lot of different ways that people might address resource guarding, and some of them involve conflict, right?
Hmm.
Um, and for me, I kind of want to make sure that everything in my process is as conflict free as possible. Like I'm doing everything that I can to sort of minimize that, because I want the dog to realize how silly they've been acting by the end of all of
Hmm.
this. Um, I want the dog ultimately to feel differently about like when I approach them, when a person approaches them, when they have that resource, which ultimately means there's definitely going to be a counter conditioning component of all of this as well. And then
Hmm.
more functionally, what I have found with like food and bone resource guarders, that if we do like, okay, so let's put the like whole like leadership thing on a shelf for right now, right? Because it's a little bit separate, right?
Hmm.
Um, but what I have found is that if we can teach dogs that, so if we can teach a dog to listen to us when they have a resource, if we can teach them to relinquish it, to come to us, to back away from it, um, and that when they do those things, like nothing bad happens, that they're going to be rewarded, and in most cases, I'm not even going to take the resource away. Like they can have it right back again. That usually by the time we get through all that, by the time we get the dog to that point, the resource guarding tends to be sort of gone, because the way that I go about teaching those things is, like I said, it's all about showing the dog that there is no conflict here. There is a counter conditioning component built into it from the get go. And so as we're going through it, the dog is just through that process starting to feel differently about what all of this means. And so by the time we get to the point where I could walk up to the dog and, for instance, tell it out and have it stop eating and back away from its food and maybe sit, and then I can toss it a treat and let it go back to its food. That usually by the time I get the dog to that point, if I happen to walk up to that dog while it was eating and bump into it, like quote, like air quote, accidentally, the
Hmm.
dog's not going to care. Like at that point, they're like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like we're cool. Right. So, um, that's sort of what I look at. So I go, okay, so if I have to do those things, I need to then just deconstruct that because I don't want to just, again, day one, I'm not just going to go, okay, well, I taught you like I know you know what come means, and I'm going to give you a whole bowl of food and say come and hope for the best. And if you don't, then I'm going to correct you. And again, that's going to tend to lead to a lot of corrections because the dog's
Yep.
sort of unprepared. And again, my whole process here is that I want this to be a relatively easy experience. I want it to be a relatively conflict-free experience. So like teaching the dog out, for instance, to kind of go back to what you were saying, yeah, that's a super important like early part of the process, but also like how we go about teaching out can make a difference as well. So
Mhm.
I like to teach out, and out just meaning to like to drop something that's in your mouth, but also if you're eating, I use it as to sort of like stop eating, like and usually kind of back away a little bit from the food.
Mhm.
And so some people teach that like out of the gate with an e-collar. You know, they give the dog food and they go out and the dog has no idea what out means and they just say out and then nick the dog on an e-collar. I think that's super problematic for a number of
Yep.
reasons. Not that it can't ever work, but it's certainly not the way I want to go about things. So for me, I like to teach out starting with positive reinforcement. And then eventually I will add in an e-collar. Like I think that's important for part of this process. It's not necessary, but it certainly speeds up things. But by the time I get to the e-collar, I barely need it. Like it's there as just sort of like the like just in case. And if I do use it, the very first time I use it, the dog's like pretty clear. Like it's not this like stressful thing. Um, so same thing when it comes to like recalling away from the food bowl. Like I'm really like, you know, so like you've taken the course that's on Consider the Dog. It's really, really step by step. So not only do we first teach the dog the recall, but then we do things like we'll put an empty bowl out and I'll toss just like one or two pieces of kibble or one or two treats in there. So the dog goes to the bowl. I'll wait till they've consumed all of that food and then I'll recall them over to me and reward them. And all I'm trying to do is create this picture of if you're at the food bowl and I call you, it's not because I'm trying to take the food bowl away. I just want to give you something that's even better than what was over there. And
Mhm.
so we do that a ton. And then we eventually start adding a little bit of food and calling the dog when there's still some left in there. But again, by the time we're calling the dog sort of like in the middle of eating, they've seen this picture so many times and they have this idea of what to expect that, yes, even though I do have an e-collar and I have conditioned it, we're using it really, really minimally. And if and when we do, the dog knows very clearly like why and what's going on. So we don't really have this risk of like, for instance, like one of the problems I see with people that teach out by like just giving the dog a food bowl and then saying out and nicking the dog on an e-collar is you can end up poisoning the food bowl, like air quote
Mhm.
poisoning the food bowl, where now the dog's sort of like hesitant to go back and eat because last
Yeah.
time they did, they got stimulated and they didn't really understand why. And so
Yeah.
what you can get from that is you can get a dog that now isn't really feeling so much like guarding anymore because it's sort of like, what the heck just happened? It doesn't
Mhm.
want the food as bad. So it's not going to guard it because it doesn't want it as bad. But that
Sure.
doesn't change the likelihood that it's going to guard something that it does want that bad. Right. So
Yeah.
like you can get this like false positive type situation, aside from the fact that it's just like terribly unfair to the dog. Um, but and like it doesn't take that long. It just doesn't take that long to like do a nice healthy foundation and kind of work your way up to these things, right? So basically
Yeah.
what I'm doing is I'm like if I've got to recall the dog away from the food bowl, how can I break that into like tiny pieces and sort of build the dog towards it? And
Mhm.
by doing that, it keeps the process really easy, really conflict free. There's a lot more positive reinforcement than there is punishment, although there is, you know, negative reinforcement and punishment, but it's really minimal.
Mhm.
And so there's counter conditioning happening all along the way. So same thing with the whole way that I teach out. The way I actually start out is no different than the way you would like charge a clicker or a marker word. So when I start the process, it's almost like out is just another conditioned reinforcer. And so
Mhm.
what happens is the dog's emotional association to that word from the get-go is that good things come after it. So by
Mhm.
the time I get to the point of like asking the dog to out from a food bowl, its emotional experience when that happens is not, hey, I'm expecting something bad here. I'm expecting either conflict or I'm expecting an uncomfortable stimulation. When I out them, usually for the first time off that food bowl, they out like with a loose body and their tails wagging and their eyes are soft and they're just looking up at me like, hey, I did it. Like, where's my thing now? And so, um, So yeah, so the prep work, the foundation is part of the training plan because it's all very very thoughtful about kind of leading me towards that endpoint. And I try to put kind of nothing in there that's unnecessary,
Sure.
so I can put a lot of reps into these endpoint kind of things.
Sure. Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, I like how it's broken up to small pieces. It's very simple, and it's like also like especially like at the end of the day, it's not just dog trainers that are just like implementing this. Is like this is also just dog owners that like we can't make it so complicated that that they can because clients just quit easily. Just can, sorry, clients if it's too difficult, I feel like they won't it's too much homework or it's like like they're out doing their own thing like trying to like put like
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, the client's learning experience is no different than what we need the dog's learning experience. As dog trainers, we're training two distinct animals. We're training a
mhm,
dog and we're training a human. And so we need to think about things for the human, like, you know, we think about reinforcement frequency for the dog, but we need to
mhm,
also think about that for the human. We
mhm,
think about like if I make a task too difficult for a dog and they don't see success from that task early on, the dog can
mhm,
also quit. Well,
yep,
humans can also. So we want we need to be thinking about that for the human. We also just need to make sure, especially for something like this, where there are some like preliminary steps that we're making very clear to the human that we're kind of showing them a roadmap and
mhm,
here's where we're going, here's where we're starting, and sort of here's why, here's how this exercise leads to that other thing there. Because if they don't necessarily see that, if it doesn't totally make sense to them, then they're going to tend to not, they're going to not feel the purpose behind what they're doing. Now, I,
yeah,
I do think in my process, the way it's outlined, it's pretty clear how
mhm,
everything kind of leads to the end. Again, it's all pretty direct. That's the way that I train. Um, you know, um, so if I'm dealing with a dog who's got resource guarding, like I don't need to teach like all of its obedience, right? I'm only teaching the things that are going to help me address the resource guarding. So there's nothing in there that isn't really directly related to solving the owner's problem. But sometimes that happens with training plans where there are things put in that the owner doesn't see the direct connection to their problem, and then they're just not very motivated to practice those things.
yeah. I mean, especially where like we were talking about with the e-collar, like like it's like false positive, but also it's like we could just create like superstitious association with like the food bowl, and then like
Mhm.
with some trainers, we're just like, oh, quick fix here, look, I fixed the dog, and then you're just like, no, I'm like, okay, how's the dog with the bone now? Like, did you do that, or it is just like
Yeah,
it's just like
and
sorry,
like,
go
how does
ahead.
the dog feel? I
Hmm.
mean, that's like at the end of the day, how does the dog feel? Because if our goal is to actually rehabilitate the resource guarding and not just manage around it,
Hmm.
then the dog needs to fundamentally feel good. Like they need to
Hmm.
feel better um, when a human is near them when they have a resource. They need to feel good about that. And just nailing them on an e-collar doesn't really get you there.
Yep.
Again, I think you're going to end up where, okay, I can manage the dog now around this resource, but what's going to happen if a stranger bumps into him, if a little kid comes by, if, you
Yep.
know, um, and again, it's just also like love dogs, right? So we just want to be fair. We want to be fair
Yeah.
to them. And if I can better prepare them for that experience and minimize how much the dog might have to experience, the e-collar through the process, why wouldn't I want to do that?
For sure. For sure. Like I think definitely just being able to change the dog's perspective and like even just learning from like Jay Jack and Chad Mackin, where it's just like some dogs just love conflict. So if you try to add more conflict, they're just like so game for it.
Yeah, yeah. And then just for other dogs, it just perpetuates the problem, right? They
Hmm.
just go, I knew this was going to be a thing. I knew there was a thing between us when it came to this food. And again, I kind of want the dog to be like, man, why was I ever thinking that? Like this guy's awesome. This is
Yeah.
great when this guy comes around me when I have food. I sort of want the dog to, like, if they were a human, I would want them to feel like kind of silly about the way they'd been behaving.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, like definitely learning from young when I was just like super bold and like when I like basic like I remember this one time where like I had a fractured foot and I had a boot, but then my toes were kind of sticking out, and then my mom's my mom's coworker had like this research guard French bulldog, and I decided when like maybe I was 16 years old, I'm like, sure, I'll work with this. And I was just like, what was like, what did I do?
With your
Why
toes
did I?
sticking out
What
of your
did I?
boot? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we're
not a
like,
good idea.
yeah, and he aimed. He started looking at my foot. I was like, oh no. And I'm like, all I learned was like, this is like before I talked to you or like had their back or anything like that. Like this is like me watching Dog Whisper, and it just made
Dude, I got the same stories, man. Half the scars that I have from dog
yeah,
bites are from like the first 2 years that I trained dogs. I didn't know what I was doing.
yeah. I was just
Way
like,
too way too bold. Yeah.
I had that like I had that thing where those videos that was just like it's like it was at this moment he knew he messed up when like
Yeah.
the dog started looking at my foot like that I got fractured. I was like, oh god. I'm like,
Mm.
don't you go for it. But yeah, I've definitely had my mistakes in the past where like I've added way more conflict than needed. So and
Mhm.
even like at some point where like even just like normal dog owners like they don't want to just like conflict. They want to like for them, they want to be least harmful for their dogs, and it's just like,
Yeah. And to be fair, like there are other issues that can come up with dogs where it's important for the human and the dog to actually go through exercises where we are deliberately being a little bit confrontational or we deliberately have some conflict there because part of what needs to happen is the dog and the human need to learn how to navigate through those difficult moments together. Um, but this is not one of them. Like that's not the best path forward for dealing with resource guarding, in my opinion, especially
mm,
if we're looking for a long-term rehabilitation solution, not just a management solution. So it's not that like I'm always anti don't ever put conflict into your training. Sometimes it's actually important because part of what's going on is that the dog and the human don't know how to navigate through those moments, right? Sometimes, for instance, I've dealt with situations where humans are too harsh on the dog. And so we actually deliberately do exercises to show the human, hey, if you need to sort of disagree with what's going on, we're gonna do that in a more subtle way. I'm gonna teach you how to be a little bit softer and to do this in a way that makes more sense to the dog, that feels more in alignment with the dog's experience. And
mm,
so, um, you know, yeah, like sometimes we deliberately have to kind of do things that are like, hey, this is a moment between you and me, so that we can sort of find our path through that. For instance, my food claiming exercise, which sometimes people see the name of that particular course and they think that that's a resource guarding course. It's not.
mm,
Um, but that process, like by its very nature, involves a little bit of conflict, and it's very intentional, but it's done in an intentional and thoughtful way, for a specific outcome, right? But it's not the process that I use. Like sometimes people see that course, and they go, "Oh, is this how you deal with resource guarding?" And no, it's not. It's not
mm.
for food aggression. Um, it's not really about food at all. Food's just a tool in the exercise. It's really about teaching dogs and humans how to relate to each other in certain situations. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like me watching like if not all, like most of your videos on there, I was just like, I think I remember like at some point in the video or at the beginning of the video, it would be like, hey, just a disclaimer, this is not how this is not what I do with
Yeah, I think it's in
resource
the course
guarding.
description even, but
Yeah,
people don't always read,
people don't
which is
read.
fine. It's totally fine. I mean, both courses. I mean, so the nice thing about Consider the Dog is it's a membership. Both courses, including a heck of a ton more from not only me, but we have about a dozen instructors now. They're included in the membership. So it's not like you're like, oh, I bought the food claiming course and now I bought the wrong one. It's like, no, you have the membership. You can watch that one. You can watch the resource guarding one. You can
Hmm.
watch any of these things. They're all available to you. So that's the nice thing about it. You can find what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, and then plus you have like trainers like Sherry Lucas, Evan Doggett, like
Yeah.
Ryan Agnew, like Blake Rodriguez, and Brett Bailey. Like they're all
Mhm.
really cool dog. They're all really cool dog trainers that I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend learning from. Let me see. Let's see who's saying hi. Hi, Janine from from Michigan. Then my friend Caitlin, that's in the same county as me. Hi, Tracy. And then Stacy's also in Sacramento area as well. And then, sup, Heather? Good to, glad to see you guys jump in and say hi.
Oh,
And
the
then let me see
California peeps.
all the California peeps. And then, yeah, no, yeah, no, especially like all the things we talked about. It's like, this is why I love like just having like live streams like this or just like the YouTube links that I can just like have it and send it to my clients and be like, hey, listen, like here's a talk with me with this really good dog trainer talking about this topic. And it's really and like when I have my clients listen to it, it's like they're like so insightful after that. They're like, I literally had someone else like yesterday like talk to me and be like, hey, I love the interview with so and so about talking about this. Is really insightful. So I'm like hoping like being able to have this topic as well, like research going to like my other clients, like I feel like they're really gonna like this topic, just especially coming from you, Tyler. Like this is gonna be super insightful. Um oh, I guess one of the questions is like when if someone works on like does like the protocol or like do you I forgot in the court, did you ever have the dogs like on a back tie in case like
Oh yeah. Yeah,
yeah?
yeah, for sure. So that's why I said like I often don't use muzzles because there's other ways to kind of create safety. So there are a few different parts of that process where I strongly recommend back tying the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our safety net in lieu of a muzzle, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
sort of staying outside the dog's range. But that way the dog can eat freely. You know, some dogs are pretty good at eating with muzzles on. Some dogs it can distract them a little bit, or they just find it challenging, or it can be frustrating for them. So we just want to be careful. There are some times where we will use a muzzle, but usually, back tie is sufficient. Me personally, I do like to get to a point, like if a dog's in a board and train, for instance, I want to kind of test that dog before it goes home. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna get in that dog's range. I'm gonna see what happens. Like I said, if, like what happens if I accidentally bump into it, or if I act like I'm somebody who just doesn't know any better, and I walk up and I give the dog a little pat on its back while it's eating. I want to make sure the dog's gonna be cool with that before it goes home, or at least if it's not, that I know it's not, so I can walk the owner through how to be careful. But usually by the time they go home, they are. Um, for me personally, rather than a muzzle, I just put on a bite suit when I do that for safety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that way, we can just kind of test the dog and see where they're at. Obviously, if it's somebody at home that doesn't own a bite suit, then at that stage in the game, like, yeah, absolutely, the dog should be muzzled.
Mm-hmm.
But then you got to make sure the dog's gone through that process of muzzle conditioning, so it's comfortable with the muzzle, that it's comfortable eating with the muzzle, and all of that before you even attempt to use a muzzle in the process. It needs to be kind of dealt with on its own first.
Yeah. And definitely.
But like, for
Yeah, because
instance, one of my favorite exercises with resource guarding that I think is so easy, and it's nice because we can start it right away.
mm-hmm.
So like while we're developing the out command, while we're developing the recall, like while we're doing all these other things, we can start counter conditioning virtually immediately. And that's really good to do with owners. So they've got this process that, because counter conditioning can take time. And so we kind of want to start that early. We want to get them really comfortable with doing it. And so what that looks like often for me is having the dog on a back tie. That dog has some food. I usually try to put it in something where it's going to take some time for the dog to eat, like either spread it on a cookie sheet, or I use a slow feeder or something of that nature. And we want to know definitively. We want to mark off on the floor in some way. So if owners are doing this at home, I have them use tape, but
Mm-hmm.
mark off where the dog's range is, so you kind of know to stay outside the range. And all we really need to sort of coach the dog owner through here is how to stay what's called sub-threshold. So all that means is we want to stay, we we don't want to get close enough to the dog that the dog starts exhibiting signs of stress. That's probably the biggest mistake, or I would say the most common mistake that people make with counter conditioning is they think that the idea is to like do the thing that stresses the dog and then give a treat.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to go, it's not like it's impossible if you do that, but it's going to take considerably longer. The idea is actually to go right up to like right before, like if you were to take one more step, maybe the dog would start getting kind of tense. So go right before that point and then toss the dog a treat. Because what happens is that point should be like a neutral point. And if we do that enough, eventually we approach that point and the dog goes, "Oh, I think you're going to toss me a treat." So the dog starts to get kind of happy. They
Mhm.
start to anticipate, right? And so if that point that was neutral has now been loaded up as being a positive, your neutral point pushes forward.
Mhm.
And thus the point that the dog gets stressed pushes forward,
Yeah.
right? But if we push the dog into stress and then toss a treat, it's a lot harder to use counter conditioning to bring a dog out of stress. Like to go from stress to neutral to happy, or even just stress to neutral, takes way more work, way harder, is less probable versus going neutral to happy. And
Mhm.
so we kind of want to know where's the dog's range where they could be dangerous, like where we could actually get bit. But we also want to have a sense of like, okay, what's that sub threshold point? What's that point where I can approach, the dog notices me approaching, but they don't really care yet? And then all we have to do is have the owner walk away, walk up to that point, toss the dog something good, walk away again. And it's entirely safe. There's really no risk at all involved here. And by the time we would take the dog off the back tie, the food that they have is gone. So there's nothing left that the dog is guarding. The only time I wouldn't do this is some dogs will still guard an empty bowl, and then we'd have to
Mhm.
be careful. We might have to rig up some sort of system that allows us to remove the empty bowl from a distance, which could be as simple as having the bowl attached to a rope that's
Mhm.
extended out towards the handler. So when the dog's all done and the exercise is done, again, from a distance where the dog is not triggered, the handler can pull that bowl away before they
Mhm.
have to approach to remove the back tie. So we just want to be thinking about those types of things. But in most cases, most dogs, once the food's gone, they're not guarding anymore, especially if you wait a few minutes. And so it's really safe. It's a great exercise because even kids can be involved. Usually I'll have them like holding their parent's hand at first just to make sure they don't go too far. Um, but a child can approach and throw treats to the dog, so the dog starts to have a positive association with the child approaching. It's an easy and very safe thing that we can do pretty much from day one with the
Mhm.
dog.
Yeah, I think yeah, I was literally about to ask you that, like, your thoughts on, like, like, if, dogs eating the bowl, like, just throwing either, like, hot dog or just throwing, like, extra food, like, treats at, like, as you step up and back up kind of thing. But you
Yeah.
totally just answered my question just now, so that
Yeah,
was
yeah. I mean, for mild cases of resource guarding, you might be able to solve the whole problem that way. For more
Mhm.
serious cases, I don't want to say that it's not possible to solve the problem that way. I think it's less likely that the average owner is going to do it consistently and for long enough that it's going to work. And the other thing that I always think about when it comes to aggression, I do think that as trainers, we need to think about how long something takes. Not that we want to take shortcuts, but every day that passes that the problem is not resolved is a day that there's risk on the table,
Mhm.
is a day that there's a possibility of that dog biting somebody.
Yep.
And so if one way of solving the problem is going to take 90 days and the other way of solving the problem is going to take 30 days, well, the 90-day way of solving it has 200% more time where there's risk involved versus the 30-day way of solving it.
Mhm.
We need to think about that. That's a safety issue. And so again, like even if a more serious case could be solved with just counter conditioning on its own, I've never seen anybody be able to do it at the speed that we can do it if we just add in a little bit of other stuff, um, and including a very, very little bit of, you know, pressure, if you will, negative reinforcement or punishment. And again, if you watch my course, like it's really, when I say a little bit, like it's a little bit, but just that little bit can speed the whole process up tremendously. I also think so. I'm actually not big on using e-collars to resolve aggression in general. Like I don't
Mhm.
use e-collars for leash reactivity that much. I don't use them for human aggression that much. Resource guarding is one of the few like serious behavior problems that I really like the e-collar for
Mhm.
because it adds a tremendous layer of safety. Like God forbid the dog does get something they can't have and it's just not an ideal scenario. It allows the owner to have some control, but from a distance, from a safe distance. And when we do need, if we do need to give any kind of correction, it's a very non-confrontational correction compared to if we had to like use a leash and give a leash correction. The e-collar can be done in a way that's very impersonal, and we want to keep it impersonal with resource guarding cases. Again, there are other situations, like for instance, if in the sort of rare situations where I do use an e-collar for reactivity, it's actually the opposite. I actually want the dog to associate the e-collar with it being a very personal kind of thing as an extension of me. This is me expressing myself to you in just a
Mhm.
more amplified way. Um, but the nice thing about the e-collar is we can keep it extraordinarily impersonal if we want to. And because of that, it keeps the confrontation low. Because the confrontation's low, it means the intensity of correction is lower, usually comparative to if we were to rely on like a leash correction, for
Mhm.
instance. So I do like the e-collar quite a bit for resource guarding dogs. And by the way, like for a lot of the dogs that they only guard things that they steal, like things they're not supposed to have, for a lot of those dogs, honestly, if you just teach them the out and then you get it established on the e-collar so that you can enforce it if you need to, and you teach them a recall with the e-collar, for most of those dogs, the resource guarding disappears at that point because like the jig is up. Like it's no longer a game they can win. It's like not only is Big Brother is watching, but Big Brother has arms that are 1 mile long and reach out and touch me. Like it gives you such an amazing sort of leverage where the dog goes, okay, this is not a game worth playing anymore. This is not a fight
Mhm.
worth picking. And so in most cases, it's not even like you would like directly address the guarding in any way. That's one of the situations where it does sometimes just tend to disappear when you go through that foundation stuff.
For sure. Yeah. You have so many people that either like if they see something the dog has, they just reach in and grab it out, pull it out of their mouth, or they chase the dog, and then it's just one whole game or one whole just conflict palooza, like at that point. So
Yeah.
um now talking about it, now I have like couple more questions popped out of my head, which is great. Because I guess cause I think when you meant because I mean like I guess we mentioned like how we deal with resource guarding with dogs, with other dogs.
Mhm.
Um, like how if we had a dog that had resource guarding with like obviously I imagine like we're not just gonna have like a dog just blatantly go up to the dog with a resource like recklessly kind of thing. But I guess the question is like if someone had an issue with had a dog that resource guarded things with other dogs, how would one approach that or how to do it? Would you say it'd be more management or do you have like a
No, not
certain way?
necessarily. So I mean, part of it we have to kind of distinguish like what specifically is going on here. So
Mhm.
if it's a dog that they live with, that's very different from like a dog who, finds its favorite stick at the dog park and then resource guards it, right? Like those are
Mhm.
very different situations.
Yeah.
Um, so in many cases, when it's two dogs living together, again, it can be complicated, but it doesn't have to be. One of the first things that I do, and this is often this is the solution in and of itself, um, is whichever dog is doing the guarding, right, is not actually the dog that I start with.
Mhm.
So I actually start with the other dog. And what I do with that dog is usually I'll go through my food claiming process but it doesn't have to be food claiming. Essentially, the idea is I just want to teach that dog how I'm going to tell it when I need it to leave something alone.
Mhm.
So the whole functional part of the food claiming process is so aside from the relationship kind of piece of it, but the behavioral piece of it is okay, there's something that the dog wants and that they want to move toward. And we want to create a language to communicate, hey, that thing is off limits to you right now, and I need you to move away or stay away from it. And also
Mhm.
like really like get it out of your mind. Like just move on. Right. Like that's what we're teaching the dog to do. And so we're using food as sort of a controlled thing that the dog goes, ooh, food, right? And then we sort of teach the dog. And the idea here is that usually when we're doing that with the food claiming, the dog has a problem elsewhere in life where there's something they want to move towards, right? Like maybe they're leash reactive. They want to lunge towards other dogs. Or maybe they have high prey drive. Maybe it's a doorbell issue. But if the dog and owner don't know how to have that conversation together, we don't want to do it for the first time in the face of that like really intense problem. So food claiming gives us this controlled thing that we can do where we can control the difficulty of it. We can make it easier if need be. We can make it more challenging. We can do it in the peace and quiet of our own home. It's a very low stakes situation. You can make mistakes where the dog goes, oh, okay, I think so. When you move in that way and you make that sound, I'm starting to understand what you want from me. And I'm getting really good at doing it. And the owner is also going like, okay, cool. I'm starting to understand how I need to communicate this, and I'm getting really good at doing it. And they're both learning that in like something that doesn't really matter that much. If the food did matter, like if the food was something that was a problem, I wouldn't use food for this process because the whole idea is to use something that's low stakes, right? It's kind of the equivalent of like you teach the dog to come when called in an enclosed, safe area. You don't try to teach them to come when called when they're chasing a deer in an open field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I teach that to the other, like the dog who's on the receiving end of the aggression, right? Because ultimately what I'm going to do, the thing that I'm going to teach them is off limits, is the dog that guards when it has resources.
Mm.
What I want the dog that's guarding to see is that they don't need to guard because I, as the human, as the person who's in charge, again, this is why relationship matters, right? I've created a rule that you guys are not allowed to bug each other when you have bones or when you have food. If you're both eating and one of you finishes, you need to leave. You need to walk away. And I'm going to enforce that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to get you guys to the point where that just becomes the norm. Like that becomes the default. And often when we do that, the dogs stop guarding towards each other. They go, okay, cool. Like I don't need to be the enforcer about this whole thing. It's like he doesn't mess with me with my food. If he does try, dad's on top of it or mom's on top of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the bulk of it. Now, if I've gone through that and the dog is still showing aggression, then I'll take other steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there may need to be some correction involved or whatnot, but that gets really dicey. Again, that can be dangerous when we're talking about two dogs. It's not like a human where I can tell this human, okay, take 3 steps forward and then stop, right? Like I don't have as much control over another dog for these things. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I prefer, if I'm going to take some of these other steps, I would prefer to do it in a board and train where I could like use one of my personal dogs who knows what to do. Like they know if another dog snaps at them, they know to walk away. And we've got a lot of safety measures that we put in place. It's usually more than one handler involved and things like that. So, but a lot of times that would be my starting point, is actually just teaching both dogs, but starting with the dog who's, like I said, the receiving end of the aggression, is teaching them, hey, when he's got his food, it's off limits to you. You need to move away. You need to walk away. Don't even look at him. Don't even be thinking about it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually starting there. So in the beginning, it does look like management, but when you do it enough, and when I say enough, it actually doesn't take a lot. The dogs all start to relax around each other because, again, there's an authority figure who's present, who's establishing rules. It's no different than any other grouping of individuals, right? If there's a resource involved and there's a bunch of individuals around and there's no rules about those resources and no authority figures, there's going to be conflicts that arise.
Mm-hmm.
When you introduce clear rules and there's somebody who's clearly in charge of ensuring that everybody follows the same rules, everybody can relax a little bit and things go a lot more peacefully.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. Especially where it's just like everyone focuses on the dog that guards, but then they don't focus on like the goofy golden that's just like, I'll just take this now and then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for those things, like we need to always have both dogs because it's the dynamic between the two of them. Again, this is different from a dog who resource guards. I mean, first off, like if your dog's resource guarding at the dog park, stop bringing them to the dog park. It's not fair to everybody else there. But if you have a dog that resource guards, but you don't live with another dog, but you go to your mom's house a lot and your mom has a dog, right? Or your sister has a dog. You know what I mean? Those are a little bit different scenarios, not terribly different, but a little bit different. But when it's two dogs in the same house, that's generally the starting point for me.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think there's just two more things I kind of hopefully we can bring in talk about real quick, not take too long, and then we can wrap it up. I guess like I think you already answered this from the beginning, but say like I've run into like a couple clients who have dogs who like the research guard like the person itself, or
Mhm.
like just like a little chihuahua, like the little insecure chihuahua that's like it's on her lap, and then like a best friend or a mom or dad walks like try to walk towards the couch or try to sit next to them, and you have the little dog just
Yeah,
like
yeah. I know exactly
kind
what
of
you're
thing.
talking about. Yeah,
Would you say like that's like I feel like for me that's definitely like a relationship thing, or like just like
100%. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it's tricky too, because those types of issues often are misdiagnosed, or at least like
Hmm.
misrepresented by the dog's owner. So you'll often hear two things. You'll hear owners say things like, my dog is resource guarding me, or my dog
Hmm.
is protecting me.
Hmm.
And more often than not, neither of those things are true. Right. So
Right.
sometimes I would say the resource guarding one is true more often than the protecting one. Usually the protecting, like the dog's protecting themselves.
Hmm.
And they just feel a little bit more confident when they're with their owner, or there's something called the safe haven effect that can also increase the dog's defensiveness when it's near its owner. But um, the resource guarding one can be more true. Again, more often than not, here we're dealing with like an insecure type dog, though. Um, and that insecure dog, again, when it's near its owner, maybe feels a little bit more confident to be growly and bitey. But also it may be that, okay, so here's the deal. If an insecure dog, maybe that dog feels uncertain about new people, and it's just in open space, right?
Hmm.
It can very easily walk away from people.
Hmm.
When it's near its owner, so this thing called the safe haven effect, they've studied this with children, right? So they'll put like a child and its mother in a big open room, and there's toys around the room, and the kid will go anywhere in the room and play. And then they put a stranger in the room, and now the kid stays really close to its mom because there's some uncertainty, right? A little bit of insecurity. So now I'm drawn. There's a pull towards my mom.
Hmm.
Okay, so now we know that dogs, for instance, that are cornered are more likely to be defensive, right? A dog whose flight is restricted, it could be on a leash, it could be physically in a corner, is more likely to be defensive. But we don't often think about the fact of this safe haven effect, that when the dog's already near its owner and there's somebody approaching, it's hard for the dog to go away from its owner in that moment. It wants to stay close to its owner, and that can create the same kind of psychological effect as being cornered, right? Its
Hmm.
flight response is inhibited, not physically inhibited, but it has these competing forces. The insecurity of this person approaching makes me want to leave, but leaving means I'm further away from mom, which makes me even feel more insecure. So I got to stay close to mom. So now I got, my only option is to get snappy and bitey to make this guy go away. And so that's less about resource guarding and more about insecurity at that
Hmm.
point, right?
Yeah.
Um, if it is more of a true resource guarding thing, usually that's going to be, again, a more confident, assertive type dog, or at least they're feeling assertive and confident in that moment. They are really claiming their human as an object to be possessed. And
Uh-huh.
that's where there is very, very, like a very clear and strong correlation with relationship or hierarchy type issues.
Hmm.
Um, my starting point there is kind of the same. I actually like to start with the food claiming exercise because I'm teaching the owner how to like get the dog to move away. But then ultimately, the thing that the dog needs to move away from is the owner itself.
Hmm.
So the owner starts by claiming food or anything else, or it doesn't have to be food. But ultimately, what they're going to claim is their own personal space.
For sure. For sure.
And
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
need to do that on a regular basis. They need to do it. And often in these cases, so one question that I ask people whenever I suspect that there might be some, like, again, just a lack of clear leadership in the household, I'll ask people, I say, how often, if your dog comes into your personal space, do you tell the dog, like, no, not now, go away?
Hmm.
And more often than not, the answer is like 0% of the time. Right. Which, if you own like a super docile dog, fine. Like, it doesn't matter. Right. Like my little dog, Abby, is super docile. I
Hmm.
barely ever tell her to go away. but she doesn't have a like aggressive bone in her body. That's the genetic thing, right? But a
Mm-hmm.
dog who's more predisposed to feeling that kind of assertiveness and whatnot, how we treat our own personal space says a lot about who we are to our dogs. And most people don't even have another like even our spouses. We sometimes say, "Hey, not now. Like I don't feel like cuddling right now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't touch me right now," or
Mm-hmm.
you know, so could go further than that, right? But they then very rarely will have that same conversation with their dog,
For sure. For sure.
and it makes you like a doormat, right? Like people who don't set personal boundaries get taken advantage of. Period. And if we don't set personal boundaries with our dogs, we will get taken advantage of. And so
Mm-hmm.
the very first place to start in a lot of cases, but especially in a case like you're describing here, if it is resource guarding, is the person needs to start setting very quite literally personal boundaries, like boundaries of their personal space. And there's ways that I clearly define for people, like when to set that boundary, when not to. I'm not going to go into like super detail here. I've discussed it in a lot of places elsewhere, but just for time's sake. But ultimately, that's a really good place to start. And when they can do that, it really starts to change things. And then part of the food claiming process is we do kind of go through and we say, okay, if we do need to use any sort of correction here, what kind of correction is going to give us the kind of response that we want? Like I do not believe that all forms of correction are created equal, and different types of experiences are going to be received differently by different dogs in different contexts. So we've got to find the right kind of correction. Often when we do, we use less of it, we use less intensity, which is
Mm-hmm.
very important. And so again, now we can do exercises where we've created this language. We've done it in a lot of different contexts. We've generalized this idea of like, you cannot be next to me right now. I am off limits to you right now. And then cool. Now in that same context, I'm off limits to you right now. And this other person's going to approach me.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to deal with that. Like you need to just be okay with that. But we've prepared you for it. We've done
Mm-hmm.
this. We've done it with food. We've done it with other types of spaces. We've done it with different objects. We've done it with your favorite tree that you like to pee on your walks. Like we've generalized this idea of there's something you want that you just can't have right now.
Right.
And by the time we get to the things that are difficult, you've practiced it enough that it's not so difficult anymore. So again, the use of actual correction is quite minimal because of the way that we are preparing the dog for the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But that's essentially how we deal with that.
Gotcha.
So it's really, it's very similar to like the food aggression thing, where like we start with recalling the dog off the empty bowl and teaching out with positive reinforcement, right? It's the same thing. I'm going to teach you how to give space to something. I'm going to teach you how to relinquish something. And I'm going to, in this case, it's ultimately going to be me, but I'm not going to start with me because I know that that's the hard thing for you. I'm going to start with something way easier so that it doesn't have to be this difficult, hard experience that's like tons of correction right out of the gate. We're going to really we're going to deconstruct it and we're going to build you up. And
Mm-hmm.
when we do that, it goes really, really fast. And the dog's attitude stays really good throughout the whole thing. And it works. I mean, at the end of the day, it works, which is the most important thing.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, it's like like for me, I have my perspective or like just what my thoughts are or what could it be, but I always love listening to like other people and their opinion and their thoughts about topics like that. So, one more thing. Oh yeah, so after I figured we maybe go over maybe like some quick ways, like if we have a dog with resource guarding, like what are some ways we could manage it, and then we can like wrap it up from there.
Sure.
Like if right, like in the sense like if while we're in the process of working with the dog with like resource guarding, like I assume like for simple stuff like management, it's like like if the dog has like his food or if like we were talking about like, between like if like the rope with the bowl with the rope kind of thing, we can always pull that just
Mm-hmm.
in case, or like whatever like high value or like chew or like food we can just give the dog in
Yeah.
a crate, not
You
an
feed the dog
open
in a crate.
space.
If the dog, for dogs that resource guard even the empty bowl, put the
Hmm.
food on the floor.
Hmm.
Who said it
Yeah,
has to be a bowl? Right.
true,
So
so true.
you might run your vacuum a little bit more than normal, but yeah, there's lots of ways that we can keep things safe. I mean, listen, like I grew up in the 80s, the 1980s, and we we were just different with dogs back then, I guess. But
Hmm.
I had a dog as a kid that was a resource guarder, and we just the whole family just knew like you just leave him alone while he eats, right? So it at the end of the day, I mean, if it's something like food, it's not that hard to manage. Where it gets trickier to manage is again, like the dogs that they'll steal things. Then we have to be
Hmm.
pretty diligent about keeping our house, free of things the dog can steal.
Yep.
Or when it's like a multi-dog household with resource guarding between the multiple dogs. Um, but I think the benefit of the way I like to approach resource guarding is that it's fast. So we don't need to rely on management for very long. And again, that's why I
Gotcha.
say like I do think I do think speed matters when it comes to aggression rehab because risk matters.
Yep.
And every day that goes by, risk is on the table. And I
Yep.
don't care how good your management plans are, risk is on the table.
Yep.
And so we want to address things, relatively quickly and safely, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially like if like we have a serious research guard and then we have kids involved, like they live with kids, or even just like
Yeah. Yeah.
if all it takes is like one incident, like within 24 hours, and the person's ready to just give this dog up to the shelter or you know euthanize it. And it's
Yeah.
just like I
And I
definitely have.
take I take really seriously anytime there's kids involved with any kind of
Mhm.
aggression case. I have kids and I I take, very seriously anytime there's a child who's at risk, aside from the dog going to the shelter or possibly getting euthanized. I don't want that kid to have a traumatic experience. I
Mhm.
don't want that kid to have a scar on their face. I don't, um, so yeah, we take that really, really seriously. And there are some cases where there is aggression. And if there were no kids in the home, sure, fine. Kids in the home, I say, hey, you might want to think about rehoming this dog.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
not that it's
100%.
not possible, but it's like
You
I
just
think about
don't. You
like
just never know.
if it
You
were
don't want to risk
me
it.
and my kids, uh, you know, I don't
Yep.
know. You know what I mean? It depends how serious the aggression is, how big the dog is, what the actual risk is. But there are situations where that does change the arithmetic a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah. No. I totally agree. Especially like we got if it's kids or just like way too much. It's just too much. It's too risky and things like that. Depending on how intense it is, I totally agree.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, this is awesome, and I hope everyone listening, like whether you tag a friend of yours that has a dog with this issue or like anything like that, like if you want to learn more, I definitely recommend like just going to consider the dog to just check out Tyler's content, and like I'm gonna leave it right here just so people can copy paste it or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. The monthly membership is $20. Like
Yeah.
it's super inexpensive and that gives you access to like hundreds of hours of content. We have a lot of content on there, including the resource guarding course, the food claiming course, which I've mentioned a few times here, my e-collar course, if for people that are interested in e-collar, but like very literally hundreds of hours of content.
Hmm. Yeah, no. So like, yeah, definitely, it's all great stuff, and yeah, like if like feel free if anyone's watching this video like a day later or something like that, feel free to just post a comment, a question, and things like that. Tyler and I'm sure would love to just answer whatever questions you guys have. Um, Other than that, like, yeah, no, this was awesome, Tyler. I love talking dog with you. And do you other than that, do you have any like last remarks or anything else regarding this topic?
No, I mean, I think, like I said, I do think there are lots of ways to keep things safe with resource guarding. It is one of the things that I think, like, if you want to try, on your own, if you're a dog owner, I think you can with the right sort of guidelines. But if you're not comfortable, and if it's a really serious case, definitely, regardless of my online course, like it's probably worth finding a professional in your area who's whose values and methods are in alignment with your own that can kind of guide you through this.
For sure. No, 100% agree. And yeah, no, yeah, no, you have been a great source of knowledge. I mean, like, definitely just like being able to find someone that agrees with agrees with the method and can help follow through or help like get you through that, help you with the steps, I think is really important. So, but awesome guys, I really appreciate everyone that watched, listened, and yeah, I'm gonna post the schedule for the next live stream. But I think Tyler and I are just gonna I'm gonna cut the live stream and then have some last words, and then we'll take it from there. But otherwise, Tyler, thank you so much for
Yeah, thank
hopping
you.
in and talking. And otherwise, everyone has a fantastic Monday, and I'll talk to y'all soon.